Hi, welcome to The Musical Drummer, the channel where we help you sound like you and nobody else. It's also the channel where we help you change from being a drummer who plays music, change into a musician whose instrument happens to be the drums. This episode we're going to be looking at your brain and what's wrong with it. Why it doesn't work the way it should. What that really means is we're going to be looking at how to think outside the box, because that is a fundamental part of sounding like you and nobody else. We're going to talk about how to do it, some examples of what it might involve and how fundamental it is, and how it can advance you and your drumming. So if that sounds good to you, I hope you'll join me. Hope you will like and subscribe to the video, hit the notification bell, and do leave a comment. That really helps a lot. My name is Mark. I'm really glad you're here. Come on in. So, thinking outside the box. This is fundamental to what we're trying to do here at this channel. Again, because we want to help you to sound like you and nobody else. Well, when you learn to play the drums, any of us, me included, how did we learn? Why did we start in the first place? Because we heard a drummer playing, and that excited us, and we liked what we heard, and we wanted to be able to play like that, right? I mean, that certainly was the case with me. With me, it was my dad. He was a drummer. And he would play at the house, and I'd get so excited. I wanted to do that. I wanted to make that big noise. And then I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan when that was broadcast, and completely altered my consciousness, and I wanted to be like Ringo. And then I heard all the drummers that were popular at the time when I was growing up, and they influenced how I played, and I tried to copy what they were doing. And I'm sure it's the same for you. If you're not my age, if you're actually still a spry youngster, you probably did the same thing. There were drummers you listened to, and who inspired you, and you tried to copy them and learn from them. That's how it's done, right? But this is the problem, because we have now, because of that process, I have in my head all those drummers I listen to. You have in your head all the drummers you listen to. I have all that stuff I practice. To me, if you get a fill, this is how you play the fill, right? It's standard. Standard for me. Each drummer who's a different age has a different context, or different drummers that they learned from, but it's the same idea for all of us. We copy what we like. And that's not, I'm copying it. I'm not thinking for myself. I'm not playing my ideas. I'm playing John Bonham's ideas, or Bill Bruford's ideas, or Dino Donelli's ideas, or whoever it might be for me, whoever it might be for you. And that is obviously a stopping point for us. If we're trying to sound like ourselves, we have to get past that. That's the part of the box that we live in as musicians, is the stuff we learn. It also includes what our teachers taught us. If you had a teacher, the drum teacher, that was teaching you how to play. We have every piece of music you've heard and how that's done. The whole world of musical influences that hit us, all that stuff goes into the walls of the box that we're in. And in order to play like us and not them, we have to think outside those walls of that box. And that's not easy to do. And I should say, this is just in general for this whole series of videos that we're working on here. Becoming a more musical drummer, playing like you and nobody else. You may ask yourself after watching a couple of these, so what do I do? How do I do this? Give me the instructions for doing this. And the fundamental distinction that's important to remember is it's not becoming yourself is not something that you do. It's something that you stop doing. You stop being anybody else. And when you take everybody else away, it's like Michelangelo famously said about sculpting. I think it was in reference to the sculpture of David, but one of his sculptures. Anyway, he said, all I do is take away everything that isn't David. And it's that idea. Take away everything that isn't you. And what's left is you. And that's what will come out when you play. So this whole process of becoming you as a unique drummer it's a subtractive process, taking away all the stuff that isn't you. And so that's this particular episode, Thinking Outside the Box. That's what we're getting at here. So the first step in thinking outside the box is recognizing the walls of the box, right? I mean, that couldn't be simpler. Well, the idea couldn't be simpler, but it turns out when you start to do it, that there are walls within walls. Some we can see, some we can't see. For example, what we just talked about, right? The drummers you grew up with, that you listened to, that influenced you, that you copied, that you learned from. That's walls. One of the walls in your box, and certainly in mine, that's a wall you can see. You know that's true. You were conscious when you did it, right? But there's other walls that are much harder to see, and some that are almost impossible to see. Let me give you an example of this, because and the example I'm going to give you has nothing whatsoever to do with drumming, but bear with me because it is relevant. The example is this. At one point, a few decades ago, I was working for a human rights organization, and that organization still specializes in the rights of indigenous people, tribal peoples around the world. And as part of that, we were very interested in helping Native peoples retain their languages, which are under threat everywhere. And as part of that, I went out to Oklahoma to visit, and to Louisiana, and for that matter, Alabama. It was part of a whole trip to try and help these tribes rescue their languages, because most of them have been disappearing. When I was doing all this stuff, when I was in Oklahoma, I was speaking with the man who's in charge of the Osage Nation language program. And he was showing me what he was working on. The Osage language, like most Native American languages, was never written. It was always an oral language. And he was saying he felt like, given the modern world, it was important that they had a written representation of that language. And the Roman alphabet that we use couldn't really represent some of the sounds in that language, so he was kind of putting parts of letters together to represent those sounds. And then he said, once he had the alphabet worked out, he said, I thought, if we're going to make an alphabet that's our own for our language, we should also look at how the language is written, not just in terms of letter for letter, but words, sentences, paragraphs, all of that. And he said that what he came up with, he said, think about English. He said to me, think about your language, English, right? Or any European language, most Asian languages, and Southeast Asian languages. They might be written in different directions, up, down, sideways, backward, forward, all that stuff. But they all have one thing in common. They're all written in a straight line. And he said that is because your cultures are based on linear thinking, right? Your concept of time, our concept of time, if you're not a native person, our concept of time it's an arrow. It goes from then to when. It goes forward, not backward, always in one direction and on a perfectly straight line. That is how we think of time. And because we think of time that way, we think, he said, because of all that, he said, in native cultures, we don't have linear thinking. For us, the way we think is cyclical. We think of time as a cycle that goes around. And so he decided he was going to make his sentences be spirals, which I just love. I have no idea how practical that actually is when you write it down and try and write a novel that way. But I love the idea. The reason I'm telling you this is because when he said that to me, it just broke my brain open, because I had never thought about this at all. Not just language, but the linear thinking that language represents. And I thought about all the ways in which that plays out in my sense of what reality is, right? And just take time alone, that straight line with the arrow, right? Because we think of time that way, that means we think of history as being something that is also linear and goes that way. And we think of people in the past as being not as smart as people in the present. And we always want to be striving forward, right? Striving towards something, having more. I want my kids to have a better life than I had. Sound familiar? I mean, think about all the ways that just that concept of time alone, just that, affects everything you think, everything you feel, how you perceive the world, right? This is old, that's new. This is then, this is now, that's tomorrow. Save for the future. Just so many ways that linear thinking and that concept of time is built into everything that I know, everything that I think, what I think reality is. How different would it be if instead I thought about time as a cycle, as a circle? What would that change? Pretty much everything. It would change how you think about money, how you think about history, how you think about your kids, how you think about your ancestors, how you think about your great-great-grandchildren to be. It changes how you think about the environment. God knows it changes how you think about the environment. It changes how you think about culture, your society, your friends, the people in your circle. That all of that is different if you think in a cyclical way instead of a linear way. Why are we talking about this? Well, because when I talked to that guy and he was telling me, pointing out to me that my thinking is linear, until he said that to me, I had no concept of that at all. That was just not a thought that would even enter my head. It would never be something I thought about. And I certainly wasn't thinking about all the implications of that, everything that flows from that linear way of thinking. But once he pointed it out and I saw it, I thought, oh my God, look at, it's like, and this is all, I'm mentioning all of this because linear thinking, that's part of the walls of my box. But that was a part, and what I said at the beginning, it's not always easy to see the walls of our box. But that was wall of my box, and I had no idea that it was there. But all of my thinking is contained in that box, and this applies to drumming. If I have a linear way of thinking, right, a song has a beginning, a middle, and an end. In my generational terms, it has a verse, chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, big ending, big beginning. That's a linear song form, right? But that's not the only form that music can have. There are song forms, and not surprisingly, indigenous song forms that are, in fact, circular, where you don't have a song that has a beginning, middle, and end. You have a song that you can enter at any point, and it goes around and around and develops within that circle. And in a way, you can think about this. Jazz is really kind of like that, right? You do have an official head and repeat the head at the end, right? That's where you begin and where you end. But in the middle, where you're improvising and mutating and playing with that melody, that song form, or if it's free jazz, with all the expressiveness that goes into it, that's all more or less like a circular thing. That isn't going from here to there. It is it is going wherever it wants to within here, and then you come back and play the head again at the end. Again, that's for more standard kinds of jazz, but and free jazz is something else entirely. So yeah, right? So linear thinking affects how I think about music, how I think about drumming, how I think about what a song is. And if I change that, if I can recognize my linear thinking, my concept of time, change that, step out of that, and think in a circular way, or it doesn't even, I mean, it's not just like there's two choices, linear and circular. There's all kinds of other options you could pursue and explore. But the idea is to step out of my the base that I'm operating from and think in a different way. And then all the different ideas and possibilities that come up from that will be bottomless. There's just no end to the possibilities that can happen when I take off the shackles of my assumptions. And that's why we're talking about this, because that's, and the thing, I mean, I mentioned linear thinking as being part of the walls of my box and possibly part of the walls of your box, but that's just one element of that wall. There are probably, I imagine there's another dozen things like that I am totally unaware of in myself that form part of my perception of the world and my way of thinking about the world. There must be more of those things, and it's just no one else has pointed them out to me, so I'm not aware of them. It's like a goldfish being aware of water, right? Really hard to do for the goldfish, and for us, this kind of thing is really hard for us. We can't see it because it just forms the fabric of our understanding of the world, life. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that you try to become a native person or adopt a native culture, not at all. And I'm also not, this is really important, I am not suggesting for 1 minute that you, if you're able to find these walls of the box and step outside of them and think in cyclical ways or triangular ways or of reality beyond what you can see, I'm not suggesting that you take that back and try and fit that into, an Eagles song or anything else. The whole idea behind this series is to be a musical drummer means you play for the song. The song tells you what to play. What the musicians around you tell you what to play, the audience, the feedback you get from the audience, that all is what tells us what to play. We're playing what the song asks for, what's appropriate to the song. And so you might say to yourself, well, if I'm going to just play what's appropriate to the song, why do I need to bother with all this, hippy-trippy stuff? Well, it's because if I can get past those walls in my mind, if I can think about time in a different way, that opens up worlds of possibilities in terms of how I use time in drumming, in music. It opens my mind up, it frees my mind, it gets rid of the deadwood in my head. And then when I go to play a song and play drums for a song, I have all of these options, millions of options, all kinds of other ways of thinking about the beat. So even though I might just be playing something very simple, downbeat and backbeat, downbeat and backbeat, where I place those things and the feeling that goes behind those things, that changes if I have all this other broader sense of reality behind me. And again, the whole idea here is, if you want to play like you and nobody else, then we have to get past all the things of other people that are in our heads. And part of those things are, this is what time is. We go to school, you learn. Time is like this. And it's not even school. It's just what you pick up as a reality growing up in this country or in anywhere in the world these days, really, if you're not native. you pick up that sense. That's the reality that you live in. And because of that, you're bound by that. That is a wall on your box. You can't reach over here because the wall is here. So that's why we're looking at this stuff, is to just free our minds, to get rid of all the boundaries, get rid of all of the shoulds and musts, and you can only do this, and this is what is true, and this is what is not true. Get rid of all that stuff, so that when you play, whatever you play, you're playing it in a genuine, free, direct, authentic, personal way. And that is what's going to make your drumming exciting for other people. That's going to make them respond emotionally when you do it. That's what's going to make them respond physically if you're playing something that people can dance to. That's what's going to make them dance. It's not the part that you worked out. It's not the thing that you learned from your listening to your favorite records. It is you bringing your real self to the moment and presenting it. That's the thing that communicates with your audience. That's the thing that communicates with your other fellow musicians. That's the thing that makes the whole musical group and the whole experience and the audience and the feeling and the room just lift off the ground. That's what comes from having you be free of all this other garbage that's in our heads. Right? So that's thinking outside the box. That's why we're looking at it. And I may be touching on this again because this is such a fundamental part of the idea that we're trying to get across. So for now, that's what we're going to talk about today. I hope you find it helpful. If you do, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your comments on this. I would love for you to take these ideas and just try it out. Just as you go through tomorrow, whenever you're watching this, when you go through tomorrow, try to go through it being aware of all the ways in which linear thinking is playing out in your life and the way it's causing you to act and talk and think. And then come back and put a comment down here and tell me what you found. I would really, really love to hear what your experience is. And while you're doing that, also think about what other things, what else constitutes the water that we swim in that we're unaware of. If you can think of other things, I would love to hear that, because my goal is to keep growing forever until I die, which may not be that far away. So I can see it from here. So so please do leave comments. I really would appreciate that, and I'd love to get a conversation going between the audience, you guys, with each other and with me. That would just be wonderful. So in the meantime, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.